Okay, I think we'll begin. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Andryczyk. I administer the Ukrainian Studies Program here at the Harriman Institute, Columbia University. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know there's a plethora of events going on various Ukrainian topics, and we appreciate you finding time to join us for this important discussion. I'd like to thank the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute for co-sponsoring this event. And I think it's when we booked this event several months ago, I was really excited that I was able to get such a knowledgeable speaker on Taras Shevchenko on March 9th, which is the day we, of course, celebrate Taras Shevchenko's birthday. So thanks again. Just a couple of brief programming notes, because as I mentioned, so many things are going on all over the place, but just even in our Harriman Institute, later today at 4:30, we have a talk entitled Putin's War in Ukraine, the Costs of Invasion. And then at 6 p.m., Yuri Shevchuk and the Ukrainian Film Club will be screening the film Ukrainian Sheriffs. March 11th, which is going to be on Friday, so those are March 10th. March 11th, Ukrainian artists responding to war at noon. And then March 11th at 1 p.m., right after that panel, an event entitled The Russian Invasion of Ukraine, Military and Strategic Dimensions. So please join us then if you can. All our events are recorded and available for viewing on YouTube later. So as for today's format, our speaker will have a presentation, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions. Please put the questions in the Q&A. I'll be able to read them to you. So today's event is entitled, Do We Need Another Book on Taras Shevchenko? And our speaker is Volodymyr Dibrova. Volodymyr Dibrova was born in 1951. He's a writer, translator, and literary critic, currently affiliated with the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute. Dibrova is the author of 6 books of prose and collections of short fiction, 3 books of plays, and 1 book of literary criticism. His novel, Andrew's Way, won the 2007 BBC Ukrainian Service Book of the Year Award. English language translations of his writing include Peltsin Potamaron, which we are reading in my class this semester here at Columbia, and On the Phone, a play. He has translated UNESCO, Beckett, Thoreau, Lear, Vonnegut, and others into Ukrainian, and received the Mykola Lukash 1991 prize for the translation of Beckett's What into Ukrainian. He is media content specialist and preceptor at the Harvard University Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures, where he is responsible for teaching various aspects of Ukrainian. He has taught at Kyiv Linguistic University in Ukraine, Kyiv Mohyla Academy, Indiana University, Penn State University, and of course, Harvard University. Dibrova's research interests are Ukrainian and world literatures and cultural studies. His most recent publications are Kulish, a play, was published in 2019, Nove Severizne, which is a collection of short stories published in 2018, Свіжим, оком, Шевченко для сучасного читача, a collection of essays on Taras Shevchenko, which we will be discussing today, which is this wonderful volume here. So it's a fresh look on Taras Shevchenko. And his most recent translation into Ukrainian with Lydia Dibrova is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. So please join me in welcoming Volodymyr Dibrova to our event today. Welcome, Volodymyr. Thanks for meeting with us at this difficult time.
Thank you, Marco. Being modest to a fault, I prefer to, travel incognito and avoid public speeches. But since I was plugged out of obscurity by these 2 wonderful ladies, Maria Shuvalova and Olga Polyukhovich, who promoted my book, I sort of developed a stump speech, and I have printed this out. But I'd rather shoot from the hip, because recently I had 2 emails about this event. Do you know about this, Marco?
No.
One is from the elderly guy who I consider like something like a village idiot. And another is from someone, an English speaker, judging by the idiomatic and perfect English, who masquerading as a Ukrainian scholar. And they asked the same question. Do we need another book on Taras Shevchenko? And the answer is, and I quote, "Pardon my French, but are you kidding me?" Unquote. It is accompanied by an outburst of simulated frenzy. And I quote, "While thousands are dying all over, 1 million Ukrainians are displaced, the Institute," what institute? "Chooses to yet again have a conversation about reimagining Taras Shevchenko." Then comes a soapy story about her family getting out of Kiev and her staying in capital where she can afford the liberty of speaking freely, unquote. So what does she want? She wants Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute, quote, "to advocate for the abolition of Russian studies and for transforming Russian studies into Ukrainian studies," end quote. So what is it? Suicide mission? Overzealous patriot? I don't think so. An attempt to wind you up, to create panic, confusion, and to discredit Ukrainian studies, Ukrainian scholarship, and to present this whole field as a bunch of crazy nationalists and brutes and noisy lightweights. So, but at the same time, it's a wonderful opportunity really to examine this whole issue of Shevchenko and his place in, let's say, this whole Ukrainian project. There are actually 3 pillars of Ukrainian identity. One of them is, of course, Kievan Rus. But again, it is heavily contested by Russia. And they're saying that, no, you stole it from us. In fact, it all belongs to us. And we are saying that, look, there's the trident on our coat of arms. So we are the natural heirs. And we say that, look, this guy, Andriy Bogolyubsky, the pious, actually ransacked Kiev in 1169. And so that shows you that he hated Kiev as an idea. And so it was them who opted for separate identity. And then they are saying that, no, but Andriy the Pious was in fact the son of Yuri Dolgoruki. And then some historians say, yes, but his mother was a Polovetsky princess, and so on and so forth. So it's hotly contested. It's like the constant ideological warfare. The second pillar is Cossacks. You know, що всі ми козацького роду, this is in our national anthem. And yes, they are defenders, etc., but at the same time, so what about Bogdan Khmelnytsky and his, Cossack persecuting Greek Catholics, Jews, etc. What about Koliyivshina? And then historians saying, but look, let's consider Khmelnytskina in the context of religious wars of 17th century. So it sort of comes with a turf. That was the time. So again, contested territory. But then there is the third pillar is Shevchenko. And here, if you look at him, he was, there was not a single regime, the Tsarists, the communists, even Germans who came here, they didn't dare to say anything bad about Shevchenko. And so it's the perfect opportunity for us to really look at him as a poet and as a living person. And to do it, and let's go back to this question, what do we do we need another book on Taras Shevchenko? We, in this case, being, and this is how I would classify myself, it's non-biased, non-politically or ideologically engaged, relatively educated Ukrainian person. And from this point of view, I would say that it is not only a, it's a duty of every generation of Ukrainians to look back and re-examine and re-evaluate our national poet. And but there's a practical reason behind the appearance of that book. So I teach Ukrainian, as you know, and we all need poetry to illustrate grammar, all of those cases, etc., etc. And but I found out that no matter, number one, it's very difficult to find the poetry that can go without commentaries or explanations. Why? Because 170 or 160 years since they were written, so many things have happened. We had the total turnover of civilizations in Ukraine. We have the traditional rural, agricultural peasant culture with its ethos, its folklore, its frame of references. Then we have communism, and then we have whatever you call this, what's going on, post-Soviet, whatever. And so there are so many terms that are unknown, like pokrytka, panщина, дожать до ланового, what's лановий, ще копу дожинать пішла. So you need the commentaries, the explanations. And so this is what I did. And out of this necessity came the essay, the first essay, and I published it in Lit Accent. And then there were the second, the third, and I sort of was dragged into creating all that stuff. And I realized that the biggest problem of appreciation and understanding Shevchenko is its simplicity. It's simplicity, because it knocks you out. І раз добром зігріте серце, вік не охолоне. Or something like, отак буває в темну яму, веселе сонечко загляне, і в темній ямі, як на те, зелена травка проросте. This is like almost a childlike thing. Or а я в попа обідала, сирітка сказала. All of these things, when you try to translate them, they lose something. Apart from the thing that which once was described as the code, the unwritten code between the poet Shevchenko and its audience. So, and I give you just one example. In this book, there's the description of Sadok Vishnevy. So, and I explained that even these two words, they don't mean anything to, say, Russians or English. I'm just taking these two languages. So if you translate Sadok Vishnevy into Russian, you will have Vishnevy Sadik. Doesn't ring the bell. Sounds like a mockery. In English, you have cherry orchard. You have what? Chekhov, and everything that comes from this turn of the century mindset, the idea that something terrible is coming, but let's hold on to what we have. So totally different mindset. Or if we take a poem like За байраком байрака там степ то могила. Із могили козак стає сивий похилий, і так далі. Even the rhythm of it, pam 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 pam. So it's from high Roman poetry, but And we can find it, say, in Apollinaire, à la fin tu es là de ce monde ancien, which is the epitome of a classical art that had to be kicked out and broken down by the incoming potent modernist movement. In Shevchenko, this same rhythm is like the breathing of the steppe. So by just listening to it, the kind of associations that are provoked by this poem are totally different. So how do you render this? That's why Shevchenko is so difficult to translate. So we can have a special, talk, lecture devoted to that. But that's the fact. And that explains why Shevchenko is not so well known in the West. It's just a piece from some encyclopedia, Ukrainian romantic poet, national poet, etc., etc. But why is it so revered? Anyway, I decided to steer clear of big poems like Гайдамаки, Великий Льох, і мертвим і живим і ненарожденним, because it's impossible to squeeze it. He's such a complex and exciting poet. So I concentrated on basically short, easy, so-called easy poems. But this whole thing built itself along, first of all, thematic lines. So if we look at the poems that so thematically, I talked about what? Ukrainian romanticism in Prichin, the role of folklore, and the difference between, say, Russian romanticism, Ruslana Lyudmila, and Shevchenko Prichin. The totally different approach to this whole thing. Then the predominance of emotions in the bard's poetry. Because somebody, my high school pal said that, why is she always moaning? And so I was interested in that pretty much. And then, of course, Christianity and paganism in Maria. And then, well, obviously the attitude towards empires, in this case, Russian Empire, the Cossacks, this whole theme about Cossacks. It's not that simple or easy. And then the issue of his vocation and the prophetic overtones, almost messianic. So how did it come about? What is behind that? And then the question of nearly metaphysical loneliness of Shevchenko. And then the absence of Ukrainian literary infrastructure. All of these things, like it's хіба самому написати мені послання до себе і так далі. And of course, his messianic interpretations. So, and obviously the big question was, how good, for me personally, how good is he as a poet? And what he represents for Ukrainians. And I found a couple of things. Number one, that Shevchenko represents probably the best and the worst in Ukrainian national consciousness. By the best, I mean compassion, deep connection to the native land, and yet openness to the world, a love of freedom and justice, genuine spirituality and religiosity, and nearly pathological forgiveness, which we are seeing even right now. The worst, I mean, emotional overdrive, triumph of emotions over rational thinking, excessive self-pity and verbosity. But as with everything in life, I would say that his drawbacks, our drawbacks, are the continuation and the natural development of our virtues. And if I were to find out the two basic themes in Shevchenko and in Ukrainian collective consciousness, I would say this would be the attitude to the land and freedom. You can find it nowhere nowhere else in the world in this combination, and that's why Shevchenko is still and probably always be the man of the hour. And another thing is this: after plunging myself so extensively in this work, I could say that every great master creates a universe of his or her own. And I'm not sure I would want to live in the world created by Van Gogh or Andrei Platonov or Dostoevsky or even Shakespeare. But with Shevchenko, it's different. It's our universe. It's my universe, and I'm bound to live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Volodymyr, for your presentation. We're opening up now the floor to questions, so please pass along your questions to me, and I will read them to Volodymyr. I have a couple questions of my own. I really enjoyed the book, and I am very grateful to Olga and Maria for working on this book and convincing you to put it together. And so it was published by Bilka, yes, in 2021. One of my questions to you, as you read these wonderful essays and the analysis of these poems, when you get to about the third or fourth one, I noticed that you start discussing just the fate of a Ukrainian poet, and later on the book, you really draw it to kind of this need for Ukrainian literature, that this lack in Ukrainian literature of a system that supports the poet, and you draw these parallels to a writer is a writer alone, and what does he need to what's his relationship to his audience, to some kind of system. So my question to you is, have you noticed, at least within the last 10 years, since Maidan, in the last 8 years, has there been more support for Ukrainian culture with places like the Ukrainian Institute, Ukrainian Book Institute? Have you seen that as a writer yourself, that is finally was happening, something that was lacking, from Shevchenko?
Thank you. Well, had you asked me a couple of years ago, I would say, no, things are as bad as have always been, but not anymore, not anymore. And again, I cannot judge this. I sit here, I live here in the coziness of Harvard Yard. But what happened to me is, for the first time in my life, there were these ladies who kind of encouraged me, plucked me out of obscurity, and helped me find the publisher. And that was the enthusiastic publisher. There were, Skype or Zoom meetings, discussions. They found the illustrator, and I didn't have to pay for publishing my books. Mm. And what happened after that? After that, I want to publish a collection of short stories, right? And I have two publishers, one in Chernivtsi, one in Kiev, saying, we'll do it. So for the first time in my life, believe it or not, I had to choose and to say to somebody, well, maybe next time. I appreciate all those nice things. So it's unheard of for me. So maybe, but that tells you that Ukrainian literature is beginning to find a reader. So people who are ready to support it by buying books or Kindles or whatever you have there. So yes, it's a very, very encouraging sign. And I was about to sign this contract, but then the war happened. And I just have to shut up. There are so many important things, survival of the nation, etc. But yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned before how relevant Shevchenko is, and these, like as you mentioned, these two things that always keep him the man of the hour. This attitude towards the land and this freedom. Can you, in your book, you talk about such important words that Shevchenko uses, like voля and dobro. And I know it's hard to kind of render this in English, but could you spend a little time for our listeners now? Because you do a wonderful job approaching these very important themes and words that Shevchenko uses, voля and dobro in his poetry.
It's funny that he mentioned that, but like 15 years ago, I had a class with my students, and we were discussing, we were talking about Lesa Ukrainka, but it's she sort of grew up in the shadow of Shevchenko. And this word voля, in the book I said that in Ukrainian, freedom has two words, svoboda and voля. And what's I elaborated on the difference between them. Voля, which has this willpower also component, a strong willpower component, which is like in order to be free, you have to fight for it almost. And I said that, there's nothing like this in English. And then I corrected myself and said, well, there's a freedom and liberty. And then, yes, but liberty is from Latin. And another word is it's a Germanic word. So each language, and hence which is the psychological manifestation of the, collective consciousness, has its own approach to different notions. And dobro, of course, it's a huge topic, which is rooted in religion, of course. I mean, not in the sense of monotheistic or Christianity in particular, but the basic ethic, human understanding of goodness in this case. And that's why it's a hell of a job to translate these things. Dobro и воля, so for a translator, it's a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I like the way you also described dobro as like a meeting with love, right? Or like a force, a place where anything is possible.
Yeah, well, all Shevchenko is, of course, I didn't verbalize it, but it's steeped in love. Mm-hmm. Steeped in love. And again, what is love? We can go to Greek and these four loves and everything. We have only любов and kochania, but любов is so loaded and brimming with shades, meanings, and other wonderful things that when we, the people who understand the language, absorb it, we don't even think about it. But it's like a radioactive material that inside of us, and it keeps radiating, and even unbeknownst to us. And that's the essence of poetry, any good poetry. And Shevchenko's poetry is definitely good.
Thank you. I'll get to some of the questions we have. Lily Bivings, who is a student of mine who we've been reading your works this semester, is asking, I would like to hear your thoughts on the poet as a national hero in Ukraine. I'm thinking of both Shevchenko, but also Zhadan, who is basically a household name in Ukraine. Is the poet as a national hero something unique to Ukraine? And what factors in Ukraine contribute to a national collective imagination that upholds poets as heroes?
I don't think that we can compare any other Ukrainian world poet to Shevchenko. It's a different story. And up to recently, all Ukrainian poets were Shevchenkos, little Shevchenkos. And I would say since Oleg Lisheha, it's moving in a different direction. And being a household name doesn't mean anything. It's like what's popular at the moment. And this notion of a national poet, of course, is the Romanticism, the Romanticism era. So we have Pushkin and in Russia, and although he is bigger than a romantic poet, but still, even Russians they would say, Apollon Grigoriev, Pushkin это наше все. You know, dream on. It's like saying that all Germans are like Johann Sebastian, or all Austrians are like Mozart. Nice try, but no. And in Poland, we have Mickiewicz and Slovatsky. It has to do with the national revival, which, and with the kind of cultural realities at the time. There were no radios, no TVs, you know, this visual component was absent. So poetry reigned supreme. And that's why, and the national revival is the period of throughout the 19th century. And we have the same in with Serbs, you know, Patafi in Hungary. It is there. So that train has gone, that ship has gone. And I don't think we can, or we need to reconstruct that thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Volodymyr. A question from Anatoly Saikli. Can you help put the question into context? Do we need another book about Shevchenko? Can you talk about some of the other books that have been written about him and your assessment of that corpus?
We are talking about ocean, you know. You have to understand that there's the whole industry, there's the whole Institute of Shevchenko Studies in Ukraine and maybe sporadically in the West. And there's also a danger for it. And this danger, Milan Kundera talked about this. And he talked about Bożena Nemtsova, also a huge figure for Czech-Bohemian culture. And he said that she actually became a hostage of Bohemists, of those who study Czech literature. And he said that every big artist has to be viewed in three contexts: in the totally local, encapsulated in its time, in the wider context of like in that case there was the Austro-Hungarian Empire or the Russian Empire. Definitely, we without the context of Russian Empire we would never understand Shevchenko, because he had patrons in the upper circles of Russian imperial society, and then the world culture. We are talking about periods of romanticism or modernism or whatnot, because we are all kind of very sensitive, and if only because we want to be hip, we want to be cool, we want to be with it, like Ukrainians all of a sudden, oh, we are postmodernists. Okay, all right. So there are these three contexts, and only within these three contexts we can judge an artist, a real artist. Mm-hmm. And what do I say? You know, and I was also quote unquote lucky, because the pandemic happened, and I was locked in. I didn't have the chance to go and read all those books, literature. That was, you know, hundreds and hundreds of volumes. So, and my approach is this: I'm not a professional Shevchenko expert on Shevchenko or even Shevchenko lover. You know, I'm just a reader. I'm just a reader, and the shining star for me is, well, first of all, I have teachers like Italo Calvino, like John Berger, like Milan Kundera, who writes about, not as a professional literary critic, but again, as an educated reader. And I can imagine, I once was at a conference, it was, I think, in Prague, and I finished my talk, and somebody asked, so what school of thought what school of literary criticism do you belong to? And what I thought of immediately was the question I was posed to Harrison Ford. And he was once asked, what sort of school do you belong to as an actor? And he said, I belong to let's pretend school. So I belong to let's read school. And therefore my associations, they're not that crazy, you know, I think they're appropriate. So I put people like Philip Roth on board and his conversion of the Jews, or Czesław Miłosz, Pro rідну мову, about my native tongue, or a bunch of other allusions, and which I thought appropriate. In a way, I was trying to write a book which I would be happy to read. That's all.
Thank you. I was happy to read it too. And we have a comment from another reader of the book. Thank you for sharing your, Oleg Tretiak writes, thank you for sharing your insights. It was satisfying to get a fuller meaning of Shevchenko's poetry. However, I did have difficulties understanding quotations of Russian critics. I can understand simple Russian, but not sophisticated literary criticism. And you mentioned that, you know, Shevchenko, among his friends, you know, was upper crust of Russia, cultural elite, and there is a lot of Russian language. Do you think maybe in a second edition of the volume, there would be like a glossed or translated terms of the Russian so that the book could have a wider audience?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's be pragmatic about it. So it was published in Ukraine by the Bilka publisher. To translate it for a Ukrainian audience would sound presumptuous and, you know, pretentious, because they it's everything that is they could easily understand. Mm-hmm. So there's no need to pretend that we're so separate. It's like you went to you know, English public school and you don't bother to translate Latin. But if you present Latin phrases without translation, that is pretentious. Let's be pragmatic.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of translations, we have two questions I'll bundle here. Tom Berg is asking, certainly translation is difficult, but can you suggest an English translation that you prefer? And Natasha Alexiuk writes, my father is Ukrainian, but I cannot read the Ukrainian language. What is the best English translation of Shevchenko's poetry? Is there a good French translations?
I don't know of any good translations from Shevchenko. I don't. They're all nice tries. You know, I'm a translator also by education, and I don't know the answer to this. Let's take anything. І золотої, дорогої, мені щоб знали ви, на жаль, моєї долі молодої. So to translate this sentence, I don't care about my green years. But here, he chops this phrase and he makes fun of those classic descriptions of childhood. And he's doing it in such a subtle way. І золотої, дорогої. So you put this at first. And the contemporary reader is puzzled. So what do you mean? Because we, people of my generation or later, would say щасливе дитинство. Not і золотої, дорогої. This is the reality of Russian classical literature of the 19th century. So how do you handle this? I don't know. All I know is that it has to be a genius translator, which should be very free to any his movements. And it will be traditore, traduttore. So it will be something that will draw criticism, but who cares? Who cares? Just do your job and don't worry about all those petty, you know, people who are, but this is not bad. So you're doing what you want to do, and that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would really hope that that your book that we're discussing today would be translated to English, but then we'd have that problem when you give examples of Shevchenko's poetry, they would have to be rendered English as well. So, but are there any talks or anybody mentioned possibilities of this coming out in English translation?
Well, my agent didn't say anything. Number one, because I don't have an agent.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody is applying for a job, I would be happy to help him or her.
It would be a wonderful
Or them.
Yes. Okay, we have Ostap Stefak is asking, increasingly, especially since 2014, we are hearing traditional Ukrainian themes and folklore of the kind Shevchenko wrote about appearing in modern Ukrainian pop and even rap music. So these themes, folklore that Shevchenko in today's music, these themes are no longer considered anachronistic, but are trendy and popular among the young. What do you think will be the effect of this on Ukrainian national consciousness going forward?
The honest answer is, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing, that Ostap Stefak was actually one of the persons who inspired me to do this. So we started with Prichinna and then moved to something else. And then we did Ivan Franko, we did Kosybinsky. But so thank you, Ostapa, very much. So, anything that you could do with your literature is okay. Why not? It's difficult. I'm not a clairvoyant. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, and even Shevchenko's texts have been also utilized and adapted in popular modern forms, rock music and others as well, interpreted in different ways. We even saw, I don't know if you saw, Volodymyr, that a couple of days ago, we had the singer from U2, Bono, reciting a translation, a part of Poslanie, as a gesture towards Ukrainians. So Bono,
Good.
Yeah, so it was interesting. He read, I'm not sure whose translation he read, but he read, just the first part there. Daniel Palmer asks, Professor Dibrova, in addition to Ukrainian literature, you are very knowledgeable about American poets and writers. In your mind, are there any American writers that share significant similarities with Shevchenko, and why?
No. It's a totally different ethos. Shevchenko is not Ukrainian Pushkin. Mickiewicz is not Polish whoever. It's a different element, totally different element. And the role of American poets, we're talking Emily Dickinson, like Walt Whitman, I don't know, Robert Frost, Wallace Stevens. It's impossible to compare. And do we need to? I don't think so. The similarities, thematic, rhythmical, poetic, they exist because we all live in time and we are molded by time, by, as Vonnegut said, the moment is structured that way. But the reaction of different poets, especially within different cultures, could be totally different. Well, even if there's, one event happening right now in front of us, different people will report it differently. The same with poetry. It's the law of life. I'm not sure I answered your question, but it's a good question.
Thank you. Another question, Alexander Zavalov. Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. Did you discover some new insights, nuances, and some new aspects on Shevchenko while reading this book?
Absolutely. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. I didn't have a preconceived notion. I just wanted to, the thing is, Shevchenko has never been my, favorite poet. As a kid growing up in in Kiev, you always try to look westwards and follow what's hip at the moment. But the older I grow, the more I find in Shevchenko, and only in him. I couldn't find anything else in other cultures. I think it has to do with the life, age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you, maybe I'll just piggyback on that question, ask my own. Have you found something in Shevchenko or something new or confirmed something in these last 2 weeks with everything that's going on? Have you thought about Shevchenko? Has that come up, something that you didn't when you're writing the book, or confirmed, or?
No, I'm too overwhelmed with what's going on. It has to do with my family and stuff. So I'm constantly on the phone, and there are some dramatic events on YouTube. So no, to be honest with you, but that does not mean that Shevchenko is behind it all. It's like in a poem by Wallace Stevens, 13 ways of looking at a blackbird, and number 3 or number 4 is like something is happening, but I know that the blackbird is somewhere behind it. I'm just quoting. So Shevchenko is definitely there.
Yeah, no, certainly, and he's ahead. I just today I just recalled how 8 years ago, this was the beginning of this latest phase of Ukrainian history, basically. Do you remember when Putin was supposed to come to Ukraine and celebrate 200-year anniversary of Shevchenko's birth, together with Yanukovych? It was a major event. This was supposed to be Yanukovych's, Ukraine's big cultural event, and Russia and Ukraine were to celebrate it together. But then, as we know, I think 8 years ago on March 9th, I think the Olympics were wrapping up in Sochi, and soon Crimea was taken and everything else. But it's just, I had totally forgotten about that. But I remember that there was something momentous around Shevchenko's birthday when this started 8 years ago. But yeah, there was supposed to be a big commemoration with these countries. But it never came to be, of course.
Actually, I told a lie. Something did pop up. It's Shevchenko's poem. It's a long poem. I think it's Neophyte, about Nero, the Emperor Nero, and the persecution of Christians, and then about that the Christian ability to forgive. And I think it's a very Ukrainian thing. Fortunately or unfortunately, when I looked at all those, I think what was, it was in Maria Goldovsky film Solovki, about Solovki. She quoted, all of a sudden she quoted Shevchenko. And this ability to forgive, even in my mind, prematurely, when all those, pilots bombed and said, I had a mission, I did it. And yeah, nowadays there's the raft and bubbling and saying, we'll kill them all. But I know that tomorrow they'll say, okay, they also have families, they also have kids. It's a very Ukrainian thing. We did it, we saw it. We saw it during Maidan with Berkut and everything. And I'm not sure it's a good thing. I know that the meek will inherit the earth, but not before they crush this snake.
Mm-hmm. On the topic, Megan Pithka is asking, Professor Dibrova, have you noticed any evidence of Zelensky's mobilizing any of Shevchenko's tropes in the crafting of his social media presence?
No, he's not into that. He was not steeped into Shevchenko. Yeah, he tried to plagiarize Winston Churchill, you know. Well, when was it? Yesterday, but it's okay. It's okay. My only complaint is that he should have quoted him directly rather than to save the embarrassment. And then number one, if you have the ear of President Zelensky, tell him to fire his interpreter and find a good one, because it was embarrassing, you know. But who am I?
Okay, we'll pass that along.
Tell them.
Another point that you make in your book, I think it's in the final essay. You share the idea that Ukraine's enduring existential concerns and this striving for independence that we're constantly involved with and spending all this energy, it delays our being contribute to the world and to be recognized for it. If I understood you correctly, was that right?
Come again.
The fact that it's constantly has these existential concerns, it's fighting for its independence, it delays the contributions that we can do to the world and be recognized for it, that it's somehow getting in the way of the world accepting these things that we can offer.
Did I say that? It's not bad, actually. Yeah. I would say yes. Oh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. This constant preoccupation with being threatened. So we cannot be man of the world, so to speak. You know, we have to worry about, embroidered shirts and just to prove to ourselves and to others that we have this right to exist, this raison d'être. So, but it's a karmic thing. How can you avoid it? How can you avoid it? Again, it's a huge topic, and we can discuss it on the basis of, let's say, Ukrainian school of translators, like especially Lukács, which is lionized. But it's a very interesting phenomenon. So they had to prove that real Ukrainian language existed in the 14th and 15th century. But that was destroyed, which is rubbish, of course. Language is a living being. It constantly evolves. But to protect it, they had to play these little games, which were mind games, which was wonderful. I mean, like Lukács's translation of Decameron. While at the same time, when he did Madame Bovary, it was a totally different story. When we're talking about genius of translation, I'm not criticizing Lukács, but it's a good illustration to the thought that you expressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I said. How good.
I know a lot of people in these days, and my students included, are looking to Ukrainian literature to kind of help them get through some things here, these emotions they're all feeling. Lillian Bivings asks, are there any specific Shevchenko poems that you like the most and that could serve as a guiding light or as solace during these dark times?
Yes, with poetry, you kind of swallow it, and it's inside of you, and you behind your back. It gives you the meaning. It directs you here or there. It's with all the poetry. I don't have a favorite poem by Shevchenko, but luckily in school they made us learn that stuff by heart, and that's why I have it in me so much near home to scare myself with my own desert places, as Robert Frost said. So that's constantly radiates, and I don't know why it pops up, what will pop up, but it is there. Okay, Kavkaz right now. Kavkaz, Чуреки Сакла.
Yes.
Все твоє одна Сибір не сходимо.
Yes.
So read poetry. Maybe something will land in you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap up today. Thank you for all your wonderful questions, for enlivening the discussion, and thank you, Volodymyr, for your wonderful presentation and for answering the questions and allowing us to look at the works of this wonderful poet in so many ways. And it's, as we see, the question, do we need another book? Yes, of course. And I think you made the point that Shevchenko is a very relevant poet today, and we saw how that is the case. So thanks again for joining us today, and thank you to all our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. Anytime. Take me. I'm yours.
Okay. We'll hold you to that. So, okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye.